Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, well-being, business continuity management, crisis management, anything that helps you, your organization, or your communities prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there, and I do respond to everything that you send along. As you can tell, my guest for this episode, returning again for episode number 13. So lucky number 13 is This Week in Business Continuity with James Green. James, welcome back.
Hey, Alex, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Actually, my question is for you. How are you doing? Because you've been doing a lot of traveling.
I'm excited. I have done more traveling in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last 2 years combined. So it's been exciting.
Oh, definitely more than me. I haven't gone anywhere.
I was going to say that's kind of a faulty number because in the last 2 years, I haven't gone anywhere, but very busy the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we've got a few things to talk about, including how our next trip, which actually will be both of us at Continuity Insights in Louisville, Kentucky. But we're going to talk about that at the end. You got to listen to all that stuff.
That's right. We're going to make people go all 3 hours before they get to that.
Three. I had 3.5, but that's okay. So let's jump straight into what we're going to talk about this week. You were, you mentioned you were at conferences, and you were finding a lot of commonalities with regards to some of the issues that risk people have been, or risk professionals, I should say, have been encountering with business continuity and what we face.
Absolutely. So this week I was in New York City. Again, I haven't been in New York City since 2019. The hotel I stayed at just opened up the last 3 or 4 weeks. They said they've been completely closed for 19 months. Wow. So they were very discombobulated. Obviously, it was great that they were so excited to be there and have guests, but they're like, oh yeah, the gym's closed, the restaurant's closed, the bar's closed, everything's closed except for your room, which was great. It was fun to be back in the city again. I don't know if anyone saw, I shot a train wreck of a video in Times Square because I got distracted by Batman. Was not expecting to see Batman out of the peripheral of my vision. But yeah, I was at a third-party risk management conference. I got asked to speak. I was excited to go and be around another set of risk people who aren't in business continuity or crisis management at all. It was interesting to see what their definition of resilience looked like, managing third-party risk. And I also got, for your audience, I'd love to hear their feedback. I've always had people ask me, I have ERM in my background as well, which is, boring, I guess. But people always ask me, what's the difference between inherent risk and residual risk? And trying to explain that to people who don't have a risk background I've always had a challenge. So I met this gentleman, Rodney Campbell, and he said, inherent risk is what you think you know. Residual risk is what you really know. I thought that was a great definition. I'd love to hear some feedback from the viewers on layman's terms for risk. But here's what you and I were chatting about earlier. This is what really stuck out to me. Us as business continuity and resilience practitioners, we often hear, I think the common theme you've heard from guests the last couple of years, we're out on an island and we're alone and nobody loves us and we're forgotten. But here's the 3 biggest concern I've got written off spending 2 days with third-party risk managers. These were their 3 biggest concerns outside of, cyber, COVID, but just in general. They're a team of one. They lack the resources to properly manage their program. So I think the average third-party risk manager, they said the last 3 years, their organization has added 10 to 20% new vendors each year, but the resources have stayed the same. And they're very worried about their vendors' business continuity capabilities. Those were their top 3 concerns. That could have been said at DRJ. That probably will be said at Continuity Insights. So I thought it was interesting. Here is another field in risk. and the pain points are exactly the same. And I'd love to get your opinion. Why do you think, here's something completely different but similar, and they're having the same typical problems and challenges that most of our colleagues in business continuity do?
Well, I'll let you know something. When was it last year's Continuity and Resilience Today conference, there was a presenter from the emergency management, disaster management field, and she was bringing up the exact same things you just did, and the same things that business continuity does. So I'm looking, obviously, it's the way I'm seeing it is that executives, leadership still are focusing on the bottom line and the risk to the bottom line, not the bigger picture of risk. And I think that's why business continuity and maybe risk, emergency management, they get looked at when something happens, not as a way to prevent something from happening or preparing anyone for an event. So, well, we don't need a whole bunch of people when nothing is going on. So there are risk people that come in on projects, because I've been involved with, multi-million-dollar projects and programs, and the risk person is there for a very short time.
Yeah.
They go through your charter or your outline, okay, point out a couple of things, and then that's it. We don't need you anymore. And it really seems to be that these groups are afterthoughts. You're not offering anything to the bottom line. So, you're just admin type roles, and you only come into play when an event occurs.
Maybe we should start dubbing your broadcast in different languages and just change the title. This week in enterprise risk management, this week in vendor risk management, this week in compliance. You might get a very sympathetic audience.
Yeah, I think so. And it really starts from the top. If they're not worried about business continuity or there's the risk at the enterprise level, and then there's all those other risks that happen, and it's all those other risks that are out there that get ignored. And with emergency management, well, they don't come into play until something happens anyway. Well, you still have to mitigate all of those. You not just mitigate so that the impact is reduced, but mitigate to the point so that something hopefully doesn't happen. And if it does happen, I got it covered. We're fine. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations still see those groups as, when something happens, because we've got business continuity or risk or emergency management or enterprise risk, we've got something in place. Well, it's too late then.
Exactly.
And how much can you put on the shoulder of one person, to sometimes do multiple roles. Business continuity is often saddled with something else. I do data entry, but I'm also the business continuity person. Well, I don't think business continuity then is getting the right attention it should be, right? So I think that's what happens. We're not contributing to the bottom line, and executives and leadership are only focusing on the bottom line.
Yeah, I heard that a lot this week. Third-party risk managers talking about being viewed as a cost center. And I was thinking, I think I've actually given a speech on BC as a cost center. Again, we could just change the 2 letters and do that talk again. Very interesting.
Yeah,
that these commonalities happen across the spectrum.
I will say I'm surprised to hear it from risk, though, because I would have thought risk would have had a much bigger profile.
You would think so, but this subset of third party and vendor risk management, I think most of these people, I can't share the companies that they worked at, but you would know the names of these huge multi-billion-dollar companies, and they have one person, 2 people. It's very similar. They're like, James, you don't understand what it's like to run TPRM for a multi-billion-dollar company and have no resources. I was like, well, I've run BC for a multi-billion-dollar company with no resources. So actually,
They do.
I very much do. I felt like I'd found long lost family. We had a good time.
But let's look at the positive of that. That means business continuity and risk. We're in the same spot. Let's start working closer together.
Exactly. One positive out of that, and you and I are going to talk about it a bit more soon. And we've talked a lot about, you and I have spoken a lot about ESG.
Yes.
So I want to give props to Bank of America. They had somebody there explaining their stance and beliefs in ESG and what they do from the vendor side. And I don't think I'm allowed to share it all, so I won't. But I will say that Bank of America spends $18 billion a year with vendors. And they have used that spend as a bully pulpit to ensure that their vendors' ESGs, policies, and strategies line up with Bank of America's. And I thought that was amazing. When you spend that much money, people pay attention and people are going to follow the program. And huge kudos to Bank of America for, kind of really pushing that discussion in the right direction.
Well, that would help too. If you're following the guidelines that, with ESG guidelines that are being put forward by Bank of America, whether you're a large company or a small company, a medium company, it doesn't matter. That's showing that you're doing the right thing too.
Yeah,
right? You've got Bank of
absolutely
America shaking your hand, going, "Great job! We want to be partnering with you." Wow, what a pat on the back that is.
Exactly. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Everything they do around ESG and their vendors, and ESG is a component of their vendor audit risk assessments and how they onboard, like it's embedded top to bottom. Very, very cool stuff. I'm going to try and see if I can get some people from that organization to speak about that publicly. If so, I'll flip them over to you. They might be an interesting guest for you to have on the show. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any of them to come to Louisville in a week and a half.
Next time, we'll get them somehow.
Next time, exactly.
For anyone who doesn't know, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, right?
Yes.
Remembering it right? Sometimes the T gets put on the end there, technology as well, depending on who you're talking to. But just in case there's anybody out there who didn't know what ESG is. Now, carrying that a step further, you mentioned that there was a report from Marsh that was recently published saying that there's still a significant amount of board of directors or leadership of corporations who really aren't focused on ESG.
Correct. So, I have to give you one report every month. It becomes harder and harder to find a report, everybody, that Alex hasn't seen. So I went way in the weeds, but yeah, Marsh released a report last month, I think, evaluating ESG and pandemic risk reporting trends. We're going to set aside, or I'll set aside, some of the pandemic stuff initially, because I think we're all familiar with how pandemic has changed board thoughts. But one of the questions they asked, and these are all based on publicly traded companies, what is the top or principal or main risk in your organization? And Marsh did this interesting thing where they broke it out based on where the companies were located. So for European publicly traded companies, 90% said ESG was their top risk. For the Financial Times Stock Exchange 100, which are the 100 biggest publicly traded companies in the UK, 79%. But then New York Stock Exchange in the United States, 35%. Hong Kong, 30%. So huge drop off when you go from Europe to the UK and then the US and Hong Kong. And I was trying to figure out, why do you think there's such a disparity? Is there a reason that these organizations think differently at a geographic level? And one thing I found in digging into this report and doing some research, we often talk about how compliance drives change, whether we like it to or not. So I didn't realize, the task force I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm looking it over here. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure Framework was written in 2015, starts to go into effect this month for certain firms in Europe and the UK, but not until 5-6 years from now for the US and Hong Kong. So I was wondering, is that one of the drivers, or do you think it's cultural? I just found it interesting, that huge jump from Europe to the UK to the US and Hong Kong.
I think you said one of the words, compliance. If it's coming into effect very soon in Europe, then the focus is going to be there. Just like the Bank of England, I forgot its actual name. They keep changing the name on me, but the Bank of England resiliency.
Operational resilience standard, yes.
They changed the name again, so I never know what it's called, but I just say Bank of England. Those guidelines came out, so people were focused on that because now they have to follow it. Well, if it's not applicable in the US or Hong Kong for another 5-6 years, then it's not going to make my radar until it gets close. It reminds me of what happened with Y2K. I remember starting in 95 and people were just kind of starting to talk about Y2K, but that last year and a half, holy cow, was everybody focused, because now we have to look at it. And I bet you that's what's happening there in Hong Kong and the US. It's not on our radar yet because it's still out there. So we're not going to worry about it too much. But I think part of that also has to do with, and I hate getting into this, but I think there's also a political side of that too. When you're talking ESG, social and governance and environments, well, you have parties and people that have completely opposing views on those areas. And those people are leaders, politicians, community leaders. So if they're all fighting, then they're also a part of organizations, then the organizations aren't going to be focusing either. I think that's a part of the problem why that focus is not happening in some areas. But it'll be a mad rush soon.
One thing I tried to find, I don't have anyone in my network who's currently based in Hong Kong who works in our field of risk. So if there's somebody out there who works in Hong Kong in risk, we would love to talk to you because that is one area I will freely admit my ignorance around political outside of the Hong Kong, China government transition or restrictions on laws and freedom of the press. I'm familiar with that, but when it comes around to other aspects politically that you mentioned, I have no idea.
And the other part about the report that struck me as well, because I know it was focusing on the stock exchanges in Europe, UK, US, and Hong Kong, is that when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses, they take up 90% of the whole business market. And 90 I'm averaging out because I've seen some, depending on where you look at, the number's a little higher or slightly lower, but so I'm just saying 90 is an average. It would be interesting to see what's happening with ESG in that 90%.
Yes.
Not just the, the 30% or the, that's not looking at it in the bigger picture. What's happening with the smaller ones? Because I think with quite a few of these smaller businesses, there's smaller groups, younger people that are getting into business are a lot more socially conscious and environmentally conscious. So it would be interesting to see the flip side of that. If they're already addressing these kind of things, but it's just not captured anywhere.
Yeah, certainly. It makes you wonder if we're skewed in our opinion, because the reason this report even said, and other reports, the reason they focus on the publicly traded companies is because those companies have to disclose all this information. So it's readily available. But to your point, most countries, the United States included, 90% of the economy is driven by small and medium companies who are not going to be posting and sharing this kind of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be interesting to hear the other side of the coin, And if anyone listening is running a smaller, medium-sized business who's dealing with ESG issues, please send us an email. It'd be interesting to hear what's happening.
A moment of reflection, I think, for both of us that I just thought of, you and I in the past have been very critical about, do standards make organizations more resilient? And I think we've both answered in the past, no. But these reports tend to show me that organizations only move towards only move towards regulatory standards that are required. So how do we have meaningful regulation that actually mitigates risk? Because reports like this show that these larger companies especially will comply with whatever regulatory standard is. But if it's not a meaningful standard, then it goes back to check the box, which we've talked about quite a bit.
And I was just going to say that, how much are they going to disclose? Just enough so that they get the tick box.
Of course.
That doesn't, when we've had that conversation before with many people that have been on the show and many people I know you have talked to, that's just the minimum. You're just doing the minimum, whether it be a standard, a guideline, whatever, to get that tip box and say, okay, yeah, you've covered it. Well, great. I need 50% to pass. I gave you 51%. Well, whoopee, right?
Exactly. And I think that's where those context questions come in. My oldest son, I know if I ask him if he did his homework and he said yes, that the quality of the work is where it should be. My youngest son, if I ask him if he did his homework and he says yes, and I just check that box, he won't tell me. I have no idea what I was doing in my algebra, or half of it's blank, or there's follow-up questions that need to be asked there. And I think just like there's follow-up questions that need to be asked, to your point, when you're just trying to adhere to a standard. One last thing I thought was really interesting, looking at these key risks across these different stock exchanges. Now, if you go from top 1 to top 5, only one of the stock exchange, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange companies, had business continuity in their top 5. The other 4, that wasn't even in the top 5. So,
well, it kind of links back to what we said before. One person, all the work with a big company, no funds, but obviously something is different in Hong Kong.
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to find out what that is, why that's different.
We need to know more about Hong Kong. Maybe we need to take the show on the road to Hong Kong. Or like I said, if one of your viewers, one of the audience is in that market and works in risk, we've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'd really like to find out why that is. So, okay. So our next one, what were we going to talk about next? Oh, BCPs in the Ukraine being
yes. So there was an article in Information Week last week with the title, Ukraine's IT pros tell their stories of bombing and business continuity. So that caught my eye. And then one of the lead quotes really grabbed my attention. So this is a direct quote. Most companies had their business continuity plans ready, said the chairman of the supervisory board at the Lviv IT cluster, a tech advocacy organization. So clearly he's kind of biased, I'll give that. But he said immediately every company knew what to do. In a matter of 2 days, most of them had relocated the majority of their employees to safer places. And I stopped reading here just because I thought, in the United States, in Canada, in places that haven't had strife, if there was an invasion, I'm going to think a lot of organizations are just going to completely fall apart in general. And 2, we've even seen with small incidents, companies don't grab their business continuity plans and look at them. Like they completely forget when there's a fire or a burst water pipe or even minor stuff, microwaves on fire. Here you have a war and you have IT professionals who grabbed their BCPs and worked on them. So I was wondering, is it because they were already working remote because of COVID? Do we think Europe takes BC more seriously? And I think they do, typically, than North America. Is it because of previous Russian invasions? what that just really stuck out to me. You don't often see in a newspaper that during an event that people are like, oh, we just grabbed our BCP and worked it. It's typically when you and I do after action reviews after the fact, they say we took our BCP and threw it out the window, or we forgot we even had it. So what were your thoughts when I shared that with you?
Well, you kind of covered my thoughts, because the first thing that I thought of was the Crimean invasion by Russia, or annexation, or whatever it's called. And I'm sure that put people in Ukraine and other businesses, on alert. So I think at that time, many of them probably were looking at their plans. Well, what do we do if they come further? What do we do, under this and that? And then when Russia at the time was massing in Belarus and, along their borders, it gave them another opportunity to start looking at this stuff and updating. So I think with some of those events happening within a couple of years of themselves and in multiple locations, it woke people up to, we need to look at this stuff, from a business continuity plan perspective. Obviously, there's much more to consider, but I think those events gave them the opportunity to look at things.
Maybe we need to write a book on the psychology of business continuity, because to your point, most of your audience knows I live in Florida, and in 2004 there were 4 hurricanes that affected or impacted the Tampa Bay and Orlando area somehow. And then in 2005, 2006, 2007, I'd never seen organizations so ready for a hurricane. So part of that is, people look backwards and want to mitigate the last known risk, which is why everyone's all prepared for the next pandemic. But I think also, to your point, having experienced something, it makes it real. It makes it tangible. And, who do I want next to me if there's a fire? Someone who's been in a fire before, because they're going to know exactly how to respond. So we need to figure out how to psychologically boost people before things happen, I think.
And that book title's ours. We own that now. So if anyone tries to beat us to the punch on that one. But yeah, that's right. I'd much rather have someone beside me who's gone through something before than someone who hasn't. And in Ukraine, obviously, they have experienced it.
Yeah.
In one form or another. Plus, a lot of, it hasn't been that long since Ukraine has been independent, shall we say.
Yes.
So I think they were and possibly in a position to want to change things, to want to know how to make themselves better and move forward and deal with different situations, because they were living under different, harder, more difficult situations to deal with. So I think that might have had a help in them even having plans to start with, let alone pulling them out, but having something to deal with.
Yeah, it really did. The resilience is really amazing. If you look at some of the things that people have complained about in back office and white collar jobs in North America and Europe the last few years of having to work from home. And then here you have people who are having to work out of bomb shelters. Like, it just, the perspective of that is just impressive. And I'm just, just the people, I'm just so proud of it. It's just it is resilience to me. That's the definition of resilience.
It is. I saw a newscast today on Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, today, and the reporter was reporting from Lviv, and you would never know that that city had been bombed or that there was even a war going on. It reminded me so much of stories that I heard from my nan during World War II. It's like, fine, let them drop the bombs. I'm still going to get my loaf of bread. And they were, on the news report today, people were out there. They were sitting in cafes. Even one point, you could see a couple laughing in the distance. Like, wow, they are not letting anything get to them. They're just, they're going for it. And
yep.
Like, wow, if I get the chance to go to Ukraine, I'm going. Just to experience, that I can't even find the word. Resilience doesn't cover it. Just to experience that atmosphere.
Exactly. Sounds
Yeah.
like a resilience field trip.
Yeah,
Might
it
be in
does.
order.
Yeah. So, what are we going to talk about next? Oh, yeah.
Speaking of field trips,
Field trips in a week and a half. Both James and I are speaking at the Continuity Insights Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And I guess, do you want to mention what you're going to talk about?
yeah. So first things, I don't know if you're a betting person or if people in our audience are betting people, but I'd like to know the odds that you and I actually see each other in person in a week and a half, because over the last 3 years, I think we've been scheduled to be at the same place at the same time 6 times or 7 times, and it's been 0. So all that to say, if something strange happens in Louisville in 10 days, it's probably our collective fault, and we might just have to remain virtual. But yes, I am speaking at Continuity Insights. You are speaking at Continuity Insights. My topic this year is something a little out there. Will we need business continuity in an AI world? So looking at the lens of what will business continuity look like in an AI, future sci-fi type scenario. There's going to be a lot of sci-fi references, a lot of sci-fi movie references. So if that's not your thing, people will not like my talk. But that's what I'm speaking about. Hoping to have some fun, but be thought-provoking, not as audacious as a TED talk, certainly, but what's BC look like in 15 to 20 years as technology advances?
Well, I'm going to sit in on that one. So
how about yourself?
So I will be there all by myself, and I'll actually get the sci-fi references. I hope.
Excellent. Thank you.
Unless they're too obscure, but I should get them all. So my talk, I'm talking on organizational resilience is hard, the soft skills for success. But instead of just, I don't want to just say, hey, do these 5 things or 10 things, and do it and you'll be fine. I'm trying to make it more inspirational and motivating for people, these slight little things. And when you do this is what happens, because this is how people feel, and interact. So making it a lot more inspirational and motivational for people. I'm looking forward to giving that chat, and got lots of examples and even my notes here, because I've already started rehearsing, so to make sure I remember what I'm going to say. So that's going to be my talk. And I think I'm actually just before you.
Yeah, I was just looking off screen here at the schedule. You speak 11 to 12, and I speak at 1 o'clock. So looks like you, lunch, me, and then if the world hasn't ended because we're in the same place at the same time, we'll go from there.
Yeah. I really hope we'll get to make it. So far, it's looking good, but everything gets canceled at the last minute lately. So
that's right.
There's something else we're going to be doing. We've announced it before, and we're probably going to be putting more announcements up on LinkedIn and other places, but we're actually going to do a live broadcast from Continuity Insights. James,
that's correct.
For a short period on Monday and a little bit longer. Yeah, Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Monday and Tuesday. So any idea who we might be talking to?
Yeah, so first of all, we will be, this production, Stone Road and Illuminate Advisory, we will be in the Illuminate Advisory booth, and we have pulled out all the stops. Alex and I have learned a lot about exhibiting and what entails, putting a booth together. I encourage everyone to come by and see our trash can. We had to pay $20 for a trash can, so I want to make sure we get a lot of use out of our $20 trash can. I'm very excited about it. But yeah, we have a ton of guests. We've got a few. I'm excited about all of them. I can announce some of them now. Some of them very familiar to your audience. Suzanne Bernier, who you've had as a guest on your show. Fantastic speaker. I haven't seen her in 4 or 5 years, so I'm excited to see her again. Ray Holloman, who's a member of DRJ's editorial advisory board. I saw him speak for the first time at DRJ Spring. Great guy. Cheyenne Marlene, who everybody should know. She's agreed to give us, she's going to give us a little bit of insight on her company's compensation report in BC. So maybe we can break some news with that. And then Margaret Millett, who I believe has also been on your show, I think recently, the head of business continuity for Uber. So we've got a lot of exciting guests. We have a trash can. I joke about that, but you know, we're excited to. Alex and I are trying something completely new. We're taking a risk. We'll see if we're resilient. And yeah, we'll be broadcasting live from the exhibit hall floor, and maybe the day before Sunday night if we get bored and start talking. So look out. Certainly a lot of announcements coming out next week with dates and times of guests, and we've got some special goodies. We've got some grab bags for all of our on-air guests too.
Yep. And though we may have learned a lot about booths, I've learned a lot about how to record live.
Yes.
Over the last week, I've done 3 or 4 different live quick segments. One of them took me 10 times before I could get it to work properly. So, you know, definitely learned a lot with this. And, you know, this will be our first time, so we'll see how it works. I'm excited. I think it's going to work good. And you just said the word resilience. Even if we fall flat on our face, I think it's going to still be a lot of fun, and pick ourselves up and let's do it again. You know, so,
exactly. Maybe in Hong Kong. Sounds like we need to broadcast live from Hong Kong next. So.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. James, I guess, is there anything else you wanted to add or anything you want to say?
No, I think that's it. If you're going to be at Continuity Insights, reach out to Alex and I ahead of time or stop by the booth. We'd love to say hi and see you. Yeah,
well, you know what? We'll even say it now. If you're going to be there and you'd like to be on the live broadcast, not just to see us at any other time, but if you'd like to stop by on the live broadcast, reach out and we'll find a time for you in the meantime. So, but on that note, I guess we've come to the end of another This Week in Business Continuity.
This might be our shortest episode ever.
I think so. Yeah. Well, we're going to do a lot of talking next week.
Yeah, we got to save up.
Yeah, we need the voice, presenting, everything. So, and all the frustration. Hopefully not. But well, James, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Great chatting with you, and you know, we'll see you in a week and a half.
Thanks, Alex. Enjoy the long holiday weekend, and yes, we will see each other in a week and a half.
Yeah. And to everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.